years in the Husia. We want to talk about one of the books in particular, and this is going to be, it's the third piece in here, but we'll get to it in a second. So just from the outset, let's read a little bit of the introduction that Husia provides. If somebody could read that first paragraph for us on page 75.
The books of contemplation. These books contain three forms of contemplation: lamentation, prophetic, assertions, and meditations on death and eternal life. These books reflect a skepticism, sadness, and contemplative posture born of the collapse and transformation of the social order and the resultant chaos and loss of cultural center this brought. The books of Ka Heper, Ra, Sonep, and Ipur represent lamentations on the low state to which the society has fallen. As Kepra Ra Sonep says, Ma'at, righteousness and order, has been cast out, and Ifet, evil and chaos, is in the council hall. The way of God is violated, and his commandments are brushed aside. The land is in turmoil, and there is mourning everywhere.
Somebody read the next paragraph for us.
Equal laments the reversal of the social order when outsiders have destroyed the internal harmony and stability of ancient Egyptian society. Behold now, he says, how greatly the people have changed. The robber has become rich, and the honorable person a thief. Foreigners have imposed new ways of creating new relations in the righteous. Egyptian of yesterday cannot be found anywhere. Want me to keep going?
Let's somebody else read the next one.
In the book of dialogue with the soul, a man expresses despair at the changed social circumstances and contemplates death. This is the earliest known literary example of the soul in turmoil, confronting unjust suffering and raising the question of why and what is to be done. It predates the human book of Job by possibly 1,500 years. Hebrew, sorry. What did I say?
Human.
Human. Not Job.
That's all the reason I stopped.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hebrew book of Job with possibly 1,500 years, which represents a similar concern and question as to which it has been compared. The book of Songs focuses meditation on the inevitability of death and the need to enjoy life now for the most part, and suggests the posture that is expressed later in the Hebrew book of Ecclesiastes. I did go to Baptist church for a long time. Many years. The last song, so I guess I'm trying to get rid of it. The last song, however, focuses on praise of learning and the learned, and argues it is learned achievement which causes one's name to last forever.
Great, thank you.
Okay, finally, the book of Nefertiti offers prophecy of the coming of a righteous Savior King, a Messiah to reestablish Ma'at and cast out Istes. This is the oldest and clearest messianic projection and antedates the Hebrew model of David by more than 1,000 years. At least one traditional Egyptologist has argued that such messianism was evident in Ippur, which is at least 500 years earlier. But the passage he quotes to support it seems more an appeal to God than the Pharaoh. However, there are other passages in Ippur that suggest a messianic hope and projection. Also, a note of interest in this prophecy is the prediction of a Messiah king born of a mother from Nubia, which was the source of repeated Egyptian renaissances after periods of degeneration and despair.
Okay. So what Kareem is saying to us, we got three themes that run across this particular set of books. And as we said, we know that the Husia is a abbreviated version of most of these texts, right? But let's talk about these three big ideas. Lamentations. What is a lamentation?
Cry.
were you
Right.
mourn about,
Well,
What was it?
you mourn about the condition of things or your personal condition or the conditions around you, you know?
second.
Okay. So a mourning,
Mourning,
grievance,
complaint,
complaint.
yeah.
Okay. So what would be,
Expression of great sorrow.
okay, what would be a contemporary, like a common day lamentation?
Crying.
Blues.
No, specific.
The blues.
No, real specific. Like, when we cry about our community or our families, or what do we lament about?
Oh,
Loss of
pain.
respect for elders, loss of.
Death in the streets, disrespect for life, condition of the youth, their value system.
Bag system, drugs. Okay, what else? Anything else?
Increasing cost of milk.
The increasing cost of milk.
Yeah. Gasoline.
Chaos.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look at what one of the writers says. This is from the book of Kepler Ross Son. And somebody read, maybe to start that first paragraph, which is on page 77.
Would that I knew what others are ignorant of, something that had not already been said, that I might speak and have my heart answer me, that I might explain to it my distress and shift to it the burden on my back, and speak of that which afflicts me, that I might tell it what I suffer and breathe a sigh of relief afterwards.
Somebody else read that next paragraph.
I meditate on what has happened, on the things which have come to pass throughout the land. Changes are taking place, and it is not like last year. One year is more troublesome than the next. The land is in turmoil and being destroyed. God, righteousness and order has been cast out, and Isfet, evil and chaos, is in the council hall. The way of God is violated, and his commandments are brushed aside. The land is in turmoil, and there is mourning everywhere.
So this person is saying not only is there things that are happening that aren't good in the society, but there's something about telling it. You know, there's that line that says that I might tell it what I suffer and breathe a sigh of relief afterward. Like, what's the value of telling it? Like, what does that do for us? Like, what is
Unburdening, getting it off your chest, like you said, and publishing it or airing it to people's ears, hopefully that they'll be affected by it.
what else? What are the impact does it have?
Kind of putting it out for you.
Okay, so you're putting it out to the universe. All right. What else? Anything else?
Sometimes if you speak it, it doesn't seem as serious as when you're just kind of stressing, lamenting in your own mind. If you just kind of talk it out, it's like, oh.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Well,
not.
reading this, it reminds me of a lot of what people write on the internet, critiquing modern culture, you know, and that's kind of a communicating, you know, bringing it out into the open, you know, critique.
Okay. All right. So it's a bit of a catharsis. It's a bit of an opportunity to sort of say it, speak it, get it out. And then even back then, thousands of years ago, people were saying, well, I'm telling it, and then I can breathe a sigh of relief that something has been said. It also acts as a way of organizing, because you're also putting it out there to see, how do other people feel? Do other folks feel like this is a problem? We're going through a process right now in this neighborhood. We're trying to do a neighborhood beautification process. And Jose's part of it. We're trying to get AT&T to be part of it, because the building they have across the street, people do a lot of dumping, the church next door. And if we don't say, well, this is a problem, like people dumping old mattresses and, you know, their garbage and all this. We have a school, so on a daily basis our children are having to navigate all of this, parents are navigating it. But there's something about, you know, putting it in writing, saying it out loud, being able to say, hey, this is a problem. And then people begin to say, okay, that feels better that I said it, but then it also calls for certain action. It also puts us in an active mode. The other thing I wanted to point out in this text is that it references this sort of constant tension between Ma'at and Isfet. And as usual, I wanted to give you the Medu for Isfet. This notion, again, the I sound, the S sound, the T sound is kind of reinforced with these two symbols, and then the determinative they always use. You have to, again, excuse my bad art, but it's always things that are bad, things that are small, things that are weak. Often have this determinative. It's a little bird. It's like a little swallow, and I don't know why they picked on that particular bird. Like, it would be interesting to kind of figure out, because you see it a lot, right? But it's something about the determinative, that adjective or modifier for the word, is always this little smallness, this little small word. But it's chaos, confusion, disharmony, lack of truthfulness, lack of reciprocity. It's the anonym, it's the opposite of ma'at. And so they had this concept that, things aren't always good, but that you can always put things in balance across these two ideas and these more importantly, two set of practices. Let's read on. Somebody read that next paragraph on page 77. It's the first paragraph, passage number 2.
Every day the dawn brings events from which the face is forced to turn. I speak out strongly against it. My limbs are heavy laden, and my heart is heavy with grief. It is painful not to speak about it. Another heart might bend or break, but a strong heart in the midst of difficulties is an ally to its owner.
Somebody else want to read the next paragraph?
Then,
I defer.
We can do a choral. You go choral reading.
contemplation, choral reading. Then, is it Ka Kepra?
Mm-hmm.
Ra Seneb said to his heart, "Come, my heart, that I might speak to you, and you might respond to what I have said. Interpret for me what is happening in the land. Why those who were once so brilliant are now brought low. I meditate on what has come to pass. Misery has come today, and turmoil will not end tomorrow."
Why did the writer, why does Ka Kepra in this moment of distress, why does he talk to his heart? He doesn't say, "Hey, but my friend, my partner, come talk." He says, he goes internal. Why? Why does he go to his id? Why does he go internal?
Because, well, my estimation is that's where the divine part resides, and that's where you go for answers. That divine aspect, the true self, that may know that's not as affected by our outside surroundings as, our personality or our emotion.
Okay. Other ideas. Why does the advice go to your heart?
Also, because this stuff is so big and so much is going on, it's not like you can go outside and change it.
What's the last
You
thing?
can't go outside and change it. It's not something he could do something about, fix. So he's digging deep for solace and direction and strength.
Okay.
The brilliance of the community has fallen. The people, you can't. And who is telling the truth?
Mm-hmm.
And with
To
the
be honest.
contemplation, he's talking with himself and contemplating these things.
So it kind of gives us a sense of why the ancient Africans thought that the heart, the ib, was the seat of intelligence. And they didn't think about it the way we tend to think about intelligence as being this cognitive function. That they thought of intelligence as what we call the mind and the heart, the empathetic, the intuitive, all of the elements of the heart were also part of that process. So we got in Western culture, we got this thing, we separate out the cognitive from the intuitive, from the heart, from the soul piece of it, right? And so their conception was that the seat of your higher intelligence was your heart, not your physical heart. They had a different word for your physical heart. The ib was the name they used for this intelligence of the heart, this sense of a connected consciousness. The heart, interestingly, the word for heart is dib-dib. Why would they say that? Because that's what the sound it makes. Dib-dib. So that's a whole nother insight. They knew what the heart sounded like, right? So they distinguished from the physical heart, you know, because they were good physicians. You know, they understood the body, they understood biology, but they also understood the spiritual heart, the seat of intelligence. So they were saying, when you're essentially, the message is when you're having a problem, seek out some solutions there. You don't always have to go external to figure it out. There's some external resources for sure, but they say go inside. Very similar to what we've been talking about, Howard Thurman, and sense of mysticism, going inside, the whole alignment of the Netchers or the Orisha, that sense of prototyping human beings. Let me give you a handout. Everybody just take one of these and pass it on. Take one and pass it on. I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about how they thought about the human makeup. And it's interesting that it doesn't show up on this list till the very end. But our ancestors had a very complicated, well-developed theory about the human being, like how we were constructed, right? So we're going to go through these. That this parts. If there's an extra copy, somebody there you go. Brother Zeph. And you walk and pull up. And you say you waiting on who?
Absolutely. He told me
okay.
about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can pull up. I have a feeling you're going to be in the class.
And he not here.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So, and this is some work that was produced by Brother Davis. I want to thank him for that in 05 and 07. Had a revision. The first time I think I've thought of this, I think it's in Stolen Legacy. With George G. M. James, and he talked about the different makeup of the heart. So we think about, for instance, a human being mind, body, spirit. That's often how we talk about it. But they had another way of thinking about our makeup. So the first thing is the Khat, which I think also is a pun, because Khat is the word, in this sense, it's the word for the living physical body. It's your physical makeup, your bones, your muscles, your tendon, all of the parts of the human body. And I think it's a play on words, because I think Khat also is the word for work in the language. I'll go back and double check it. I think it's the word for work, to work, to get things done. So it's kind of interesting, your body, the same name for your body. But Khat, and it refers to both the living physical body, what we call the mummy or a corpse of a person, but it's that physical part of us. The second idea, and we're going to talk about this a lot in a few minutes, is this idea of the Ba. Symbolized by a goose. It represented a person's immortal soul. And that's, again, we use the word soul to talk about both the Ka and the Ba. But the idea is that they said every living being has a Ba. That the Orisha, the Netchers rather, had a Ba. Inanimate objects had a divine personification. It's a very African idea about how trees have spirit. How the rocks have some spirit in them. How all the other animals, because we sometimes say, well, the animals. Well, we're animals, actually. So we can't separate ourselves from that. But all creatures, and that there was a certain reverence around life because everybody has some part of the divine in them. And there's a Husia passage that talks about that everybody has a part of that divine spirit. It's part of the creation narrative. So that's a certain hopefulness about humanity that they have. Everybody has this spiritual part. It was often represented by, pass this out now too. Take one of these and pass this on. A couple of images on here. Make sure it's definitely some too. But the image in the top left corner, where it's a human head on the body of a stork, as well as the one next to it, where it has a falcon with a human head. But that idea of the Ba, this sort of combination of, well, not even combination, it's symbolized by a combination of a physical part, but that spiritual aspect, the head, often, where the character resides. So that their sense was that the Ba was that immortal soul. It was indestructible. And we're going to say more about the relationship between the Ba and the Ka in a moment. Because in some ways, all of these pieces sort of functions overlap. It's a Western thing for us to actually pull it out into a list. Because they would have looked at this as a more integrated kind of definition. All right, but the third piece is the ka, and that's the individuality, the ego, the life force of an individual person, that unique thing that makes you unique. Because your ka, the ka that you're exhibiting now, has never been on the planet before, is not going to ever be here again. It's unique to you. But there's a relationship between the ba and the ka. So, and we'll come back to it in just a second. So they said the ka survived mortal death but required food offerings to stay alive. It's often viewed as the basis for libation, the basis for presenting food and drink offerings to the deceased. And some people and some writers and academics say that people could have, the netres could have more than one ka. There was also a category of ka priests in the per ankh, or the temple, whose function it was to tend to ritual statues imbued with the ka of a person or netre. It's like what you would do on your altar with the image of a parent, a grandparent, somebody who was deceased. To keep that idea alive, it's the ka. That's that part. The fourth piece is the ren, the name. They considered your name to be part of your human makeup. That's why in African, all throughout Africa, in the Nile Valley, in the Niger, in the Zambezi, wherever you go in Africa, the Congo, names are important. The whole movement of African people in this country changing their names to more African-based names comes out of this idea that the ren, your name, was something important. Like in the South, the Africanism that still exists is you can't call people out of their name in the black community, or you even used to be. But now it's kind of up for grabs, because people call each other all kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But there was a certain generation where you couldn't call people out of their name. That's how we referred to it, right? That the name was your aspiration, that your name considered to express your essence. So people did, in traditional societies, did divination. They went to the oracles. They went and sought out, what's the name that this child should have? A lot of times people would get a name that the full community used for a week, sometimes as much as a year. Until people looked at you, kind of looked at your character, figured out what it is you needed, knew the circumstances, and then your name becomes your aspiration. The reason we reinstituted naming ceremonies is to put that focus back on names. You know, I mean, and we got a lot of educating to do in our community, because we got folks. You know, our creativity is there, but we got somebody in our community who this parent, bless her heart, named her child LaDasha. With the dash. This is how she's recognizing her child's name. LaDasha. That's how far off we are from our stuff, right? What does that mean? This child gonna go through life trying to figure out this hyphenated, people gonna think it's a hyphen, but you're supposed to say dash right here. It's something about, we have this inclination, we want to do it right, but we don't have information. Right? I mean, that's just such an interesting thing to me, that's what we're out here kind of struggling for ourselves, right?
I have an even more egregious example. When I was living in Southern California, there was a young lady, and her name sounded odd, and it should have explained itself to me immediately, but I had to ask. And her name was Eminem. And when she was born, you know, because of circumstances of her birth, her mother wasn't there to, you know, to I guess stand up for her, you know, right after she was born, or claim her. So they gave her Eminem. That was the reverse of no name.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I guess after she was adopted, they decided they liked the way this name sounded, so they kept her name. So she went through life with that.
Similar one. We saw one. This child's name is this, and it's Abacida or Abacida. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's going on, right? Because we just kind of have lost our direction around some things. Yeah. So that's the name. The fifth part, what they call the kaibit, was this sort of shadow spirit, this guiding spirit that guides you during your mortal life, protects you in the hereafter. It was represented essentially as a shadow or a double. And that's a lot more esoteric idea, that there's this double. It plays out in some of the contemporary things around, you know, this, like the good angel and the bad angel on your shoulder. You know, having that voice that's kind of making sure that you don't run into trouble. and listening to that Kaibit, or that shadow spirit, was part of the tradition. The sixth part was the Ak. So after judgment, the Ba and the Ka So the Ba and the Ka would be reunited. And we have one of the examples of the reason today. We're going to talk about that in some detail. But the idea is that after judgment, the Ba and Ka combine to form this Ak, or this immortal, blessed spirit that existed only in the beyond. So in many ways, it was what some writers call the air, the place. Let me spell it right. H-I-E-R, is that right? Or did I have it right the first time? H-E-I-R?
Air as in inheriting
Yes.
something?
Yes.
H-E-I-R.
Okay, I was going to say, it didn't look right either way. H-E-I-R. But the thing, the successor, the thing that comes after you live life, after you've been judged and immortal. But that air, or the Ak, was that other part of the spirit. And again, they were saying this is all part of you all the time, and that you manifest it in a certain way. The seventh piece, Shechem.
Excuse me, Minister.
Yes.
On the number 6, you said the Ba and Ka are reunited. Right. They're
Or
coming
combined,
back
they're coming back together.
Exactly.
Yes. The Shechem, the aspect of the person's makeup consistent of your power. So it's also used in titles. It's sometimes like the Brother Rodneff, or Amen, who is with the Sarah Set Society, the founder, leader of it, his title is Shechem, or power of powers. But they believe that we had this sort of effective power that's actually part of your makeup, that you don't have to go gain it somewhere. It's part of who you are, right? Then the Ku, individual aspect of our Constitution that provides protection, similar to the Kabit. The Sahu, this perfect spirit body dwelling in the beyond, similar to the Ak. And then as we started, the Ib, this heart as the center of consciousness, intelligence, moral awareness. So much of what we deal with, we often think about the Ka, which is represented by upraised hands, that sort of image of, praise, lifting things up. That's the sign of the Ka. And that symbol persists in our community in a lot of places, right? From high fives,
Yes.
right, to
All praises.
to holy dances in the
Yes.
Southern Baptist tradition. Any other examples of other than touchdown for sports fans?
It did dawn on me, but it was an album that came out in the early '70s with Eric Burden and Ward. Their first album. That was that was the
symbol.
album cover. Yeah.
Okay.
But half was black and half was white.
Okay. But that idea that the Ba and the Ka become reunited is key. Let's look at a couple more before we go to the book of Dialogue with the Soul. So turn to page 78. And this is the book of Ippur or Ippur. It comes from the 9th and 10th dynastic periods. And many of the social problems that people are lamenting and that prophecy is being attached to comes at periods of decay in Kemet. So Kemet was a society that went on for 6,000, 7,000 years. And it was a very conservative society in the sense that things didn't change fast. Like they were in it for the long haul. So when you do a building project like pyramids, at least people are thinking, let's say 20, 25 years to build a pyramid. It's not something you just say is going to be done by this time next year. So their sense of things was over long periods of time. So the first dynastic period, for instance, 1st through 5th, what people call the Pyramid Age, a very stable period, very stable in terms of agricultural production, very stable in terms of social practice, very stable in terms of wars and conquests and that sort of thing. And then they would always hit these intermediate periods, these periods of turmoil. And this particular writing comes from that first intermediate period after about the 9th dynasty, where things begin to kind of decay. Leadership is not respected in the same way, maybe because they've abused their power, that external conditions where people are coming in, the Hyksos are coming in, others are coming into society and disrupting some things. And we allow ourselves to be disrupted, right? So many of these writings are coming to us in those intermediate time periods. So if somebody would read for us, read that first one under Ippur on page 78, it's number 1.
Okay, lo, what the ancestors foretold will come to pass. The land is full of bands of evildoers, and the plowman goes to plow with his shield. Faces are pale, the bowmen stand ready. Wrongdoing is everywhere, and there is no man or woman of yesterday. Lo, the women are barren and none conceive. For God does not make children anymore because of the state of the land. There is blood everywhere and no shortage of the dead. Indeed, the burial cloth cries out before one approaches it.
Somebody pick up the next one.
Lo, the land turns like a potter's wheel. The robber has become rich, and the honorable person a thief. The foreigners from without have come to Egypt, and the Egyptian of yesterday cannot be found anywhere. Lo, the great and small say, I wish I were dead. And little children say, he should not have caused me to live. Lo, the unrestrained says, if I knew where God is, I would serve him.
Somebody read the next paragraph for us.
Behold now how greatly the people have changed. One who once did not sleep even on a box now owns a bed. Those who once owned robes now are in rags, and those who once did not weave for themselves now own fine linen. Behold, those who once did not build boats now own ships, and the former owners just look at them, for they are no longer theirs. Those once lacked shelter now have homes, and those who have homes are in the blast of the storm. And those who knew nothing of God now makes offerings to him with incense and others.
Somebody read the next paragraph.
Lo, why does God seek to create men and women, and the gentle are not distinguished from the violent? But he brings coolness in the midst of the heat, and all say, he is the shepherd of all mankind, and there is no evil in his heart. Though his flocks are few, he spends the whole day tending them. But there is fire in their hearts. Oh, that he had perceived their nature in the first generation. Then he would have destroyed the wicked, stretched out his arm against them. Surely he would have destroyed their seed and their legacy. Mercy and water.
All right. So what's another element of this now that we've read this, in addition to what we've heard up to this point in terms of the kind of lamentation? Now what is the writer doing?
Suppose he had reversed the order.
You crying for judgment.
Okay. The crown for judgment, for the order of things. But the fundamental thing is you're questioning God now.
Yeah.
He's questioning.
He's questioning God.
Yeah.
Like, why God? Why would you create a situation like this? Why would the children not want to live? Why would the people who once had a home now be homeless? Why would the people who were previously not interested in spiritual practice, now they're doing spiritual practice and using the incense of others? In other words, you're taking somebody else's spiritual tools, right? Not saying you shouldn't be doing it, but you're taking somebody else's tool to do it. What is that fundamental human thing about?
And he questions God's perception. That you should have been able to see this. It's too bad you weren't able to see this from the beginning.
Yeah. What do you think about that? What does that feel like this? I mean, does that feel like a common experience? Does that feel like so out of our experience that we don't get it? In other words, have there been
Actually,
times where
no.
you question God?
Yes, but the other thing is that as old as this text is, it's almost in present day. Where those of us who had homes are now losing them, they're being taken away, the rich are getting richer. The whole idea that people don't want to bring children in the world because of such turmoil and hatred, and many other facets, but I'm of the mindset that if we don't know our history, we're bound to repeat it, and it's almost like it's in its repeat.
we're with God, you know. So I think that's something that happens in every generation.
We talked about the cycle, when you have to go through that cycle of chaos, that there's no avoiding, what was it, is that?
This fact.
That you can't avoid is that, so maybe we're back in that cycle, that part of the cycle again.
And in my memory, people have always complained about the negative events or trends in society, but it seems like everyone sees a dismal future at this point that we're in now, because there's the accumulation of things happening, you know, all at once and deteriorating.
Yeah, this is us. When I read this, I said, this is exactly what we're experiencing right now.
And I think about that, especially for black people, that this whole financial crisis represents the greatest loss of wealth for black people in our history here. You know, and it's all because people saw that the wealth not being captured, so let's go after it. And get
Yeah. Now, what else is true about this? I don't think it's working actually. I'll try it. It's not showing up on there. Yeah, this kind of it's like a nub. We'll see how far we get. But what about the cyclical nature of this? Like, do we feel like we're just the only generation that goes through this?
No.
What are some other examples in our history where somebody from that generation might have easily said, "This is my lamentation"? Like, what are a couple of examples?
Great Depression.
Great Depression. Stock market crash in 1929. Black folks were already under pressure because that's right in that period of the lynchings and the race riots that happened in East St. Louis, Chicago, New York, Elaine, Arkansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood. It's a period when Garvey's movement has been at a height, and now it's kind of falling apart. 1929, 1930. Folks who had been rich are jumping off of buildings on Wall Street because they've lost their wealth and they don't know what to do, right? So it's that whole saying, if America gets a cold, we get the flu.
Yeah.
So it was bad, right? And that went on for, how long was the Great Depression? That was like a 10-year period,
like
right?
29 into World War II pulled us
In World
out
War
of
II.
it.
Yeah, because World War II, U.S. gets pulled in 1941.
Yeah.
So things in the financial condition was bad for a lot of people, and definitely for black folks. And if I recall right, there was also a big drought going on in the Midwest, the whole Dust Bowl
Dust Bowl, that's right.
piece. You know, so you
And
could
they said it's happening again here in California. The land is being overworked without rest, and they're starting to see the effects of many Dust Bowls going on in Central California now.
Yeah. What's another example? What's another time period where you feel like that lamentation might have been easily?
Slavery.
That's a big one, right? What year did chattel slavery start in the United States, in North America?
1846.
No, 16, 19, somewhere in there.
Jamestown.
15, 15.
Jamestown will rise.
Okay.
And they say that it may have been as early as the 1500s.
Okay.
You know.
Because we know, and this is from our African history class, in Brazil, it starts in like the 1500s.
Yeah.
And goes until 1888.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
1600s, if Civil War ends in 1865. But that period, if you imagine being a child born during that time period, let's say you're a child born in South Carolina in 1750. What's your outlook? Right? When you ask your parents, like, what are my life chances? What are my possibilities? What is being said to you?
This is it.
Try to get to the
What
next
you see
meal,
is-
get through the day and get some rest this evening. Hopefully we'll have some, a bowl to eat. And we'll sing a song tonight and that's it. That's as good as it gets.
200 pounds of cotton.
And that may not have been your genetic parent.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you might be lucky enough to have heard about Toussaint Louverture
Yeah.
in Haiti.
Yeah.
Maybe some sense of like, oh, there's another way to be. You might have been lucky enough to hear from a great grandparent or grandparent what it was like in Nigeria or in Guinea or someplace like that. But mostly, you probably looking at this is my block, just like a lot of our kids now. My future is based on West Oakland. I don't go to East Oakland for nothing. I don't go to San Francisco. Heck no, I don't go across the bridge. You know, I don't go to Richmond because I got problems with Richmond. We got young people that are sitting right on their block, going like, "This is my whole possibility," right? So that parents must have had a really hard time, unless you had some sort of spiritual underpinning that said there's a reason that this is happening. There's a reason that we're going through this. I might not understand it, but there's got to be some good reason for this. So let's talk about the reasons. What is it? What did we come on earth to do? So let's look at the Book of Dialogue with the Soul. I'm gonna give you a little background. A great resource, Book of Dialogue with the Soul, on page 80. And one of the secondary resources on this is called Rebel in the Soul. And it's by Vika or Vika Reed. She comes out of the same school thought as Schwaller and Aisha DeLubis, Egyptologists who also are writing interpretations of the text. And it's a helpful text because the book that she titles it Rebel in the Soul. Karinga calls it the Book of Dialogue with the Soul. Some early Egyptologists called it a man tired of life in dispute with his body. Right? There's many titles for it. Egyptologists typically will say this is one of the most complex texts in the tradition because nobody seems to understand it fully. Part of the problem is that the found versions of this, I think it's called Berlin Papyrus 3024, and all that means is that the Berlin Museum bought it and numbered it. Right? That's all that means. But they essentially have a copy of this document, and it starts with what's called a lacuna. And a lacuna is basically a gap, a omission in the text. So what we have is it picks up where a man is having a dialogue, conversation, argument with his body. So this is the way that this piece is set up. He's having a conversation with his body about the meaning of life, about the circumstances of society, etc. So when it picks up, he's already at a place, and his fundamental aim is to take his own life. Take his own life as a sacrifice. And this is a different orientation, not so much a suicide in the Western sense, partly because in Kemet, as well as other places in Africa, suicide was considered the most reprehensible thing you could do to yourself. And it still carries that now. When people commit suicide, we have a hush kind of thing around, why. We often don't look at the underlying reason. We look at that person and say that person isn't, something went wrong with them. But the reason in Kemet, the reason in Africa is considered to be such a bad thing is because you're now cutting off your ability to go to eternity. It's not like you take your own life and then you still are on the same path. Their view was, nope, you now are starting over. Because you separated your body, your kai, your name, all these aspects of the human being are now just kind of dispersed. You did the opposite of regeneration. You did the opposite of unification for the purpose of transformation. So there's a very strong piece. But his take on it, because this essentially is a philosophical argument. The man's take on it is, I can sacrifice myself, my body, my ka, my kat, for this higher purpose. But what he knows about the tradition is that he can't do this by himself. He's got to convince his ba to go along with the plan. So imagine having this inner conversation with yourself about what you should do. Your plan is, I'm gonna sacrifice my life, and that way I get out of the mess of this living, of the world's problems, my own problems, whatever it is, because now I'm gonna shortcut to eternity. I'm not going to live my life out fully, go through all of what it is God sent me to go through. I'm going to cut it off, and if I can convince my Ba to do this with me, his theory was I can still become a Ak. I can still become an eternal being. So in other words, I'm going to shortchange life. I'm not going to go through what it is I came here to go through, because just like the question that child in 1750 would be asking, why did God send me? You're telling me about this great spirit. Why would God put me in this situation to be a chattel slave? Just to pick that time frame. So what happens is this becomes a series of, it's like a back and forth. It's similar in some ways to Kuan-Poo in the story of Kunanu. There's a dialogue. So there's a storyline, and then there's this dialogue where he's going back and forth with Renzi, and first Nimtinok, then Renzi, and others about justice in the world. But here's some of how Biker Reed translated, and we'll get up to the point in Husia page 80. Because again, Karinga doesn't give us the full translation. He says, I spoke to my soul, and I replied to what it said. Oh, now this I cannot bear. My soul replies not. I'm not reading from there. And what happens is he's trying to have argument. You ever been in a situation where you're trying to have an argument and the other person just won't even answer?
Yeah.
They won't even say nothing, one way or another. They're just indifferent. They're like, I don't have to respond to that.
Yes.
That's the most frustrating thing ever. Because you want to have an argument. You want to fight. You want to be mad. You have chosen to be mad, right? But his soul wouldn't reply. His soul was like, I'm not going down that road with you, right? And he says in the text, my soul replies not. Indeed, worse than anger is this indifference. And his soul is, in his ba, the reason soul here is a ba. The ba is threatening to just walk away. He says, don't go, stay. Only with me will you arise. So now he's making a pitch to say, ba, you can't do this by yourself, and I can't do this by myself. We got to do this together. So if the ba steps, he's like, well, you're not only messing me up, you're messing you up, right? So this is the length through which he's going to make this work. Yes.
Okay, if the ball leaves, that messes up this person. But if the person goes ahead with the suicide, then that's messing up the ball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So either way, something's got to get worked out.
Exactly.
Right. You can't, your soul, your spiritual makeup is such that your eternal soul and your individual personalized soul has to be unified, has to come back together. If that doesn't come back together, no, you can't have no party. There's no action. Nothing going on. He says this, because he starts a series of arguments. He says, if I don't enmesh you in my body, if I don't reunite with you as a cord within the net, that's the language he uses, through no fault of yours will you be lost on the day of judgment. They will judge my soul, for I have gone astray, I have not obeyed, rushing to die before death has come, casting to the flames that which the soul sustains. So he says, penetrate me on that day of trial. In other words, be with me, be together with me. You'll stand up on the other side enacting the miracle of the Creator. What's the miracle of the Creator in this sense? This is a really important concept in chemistry. What's the miracle of the Creator? What happens? How does creation happen? Let's go back to the creation narrative. What's the first sort of big idea behind an African creation story?
What?
Creation of life.
I mean, I heard several things. So creation of life, and you said Ma'at.
The emergence of life,
Likeness.
Yeah.
Consciousness and order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what was the first action at Septemis? What's the first fundamental thing that happens with all of those things you all said?
Oh.
Speak it.
That's how it happens. But what happens?
When
Thought, that's part of it.
where that which was undifferentiated matter becomes differentiated and enters into the time realm.
Okay, that's getting closer.
Yeah.
That's getting closer.
Yeah.
I'm looking
I'm
for
trying to think of
really
all the
fundamental. Really, all of you who had that class, I know you know this. When I said y'all was like, doing what? What is the first thing that gets brought into being? God's self.
Heaven had,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So this idea, fundamental idea of being self-created. I'm gonna try. No. Black is dead.
Okay.
The pen, that is. But this is a fundamental idea. Self-creation. I pull myself from myself. That's the first thing. When I came into being came into being. Remember that line?
Yeah.
Most High is self-extracted, self-created. Wasn't waiting for some other entity in the universe. Consciousness, thought, speech, power of word, that's the modality. But the notion of being self-created is a fundamental African idea. That whatever your circumstance is, you can create yourself. And we talked about it early on. You can create yourself daily. So you go from Kepra, the idea of becoming, being in the morning, Ra, the Most High at noon, Atun, the complete one in the evening. You go through the underworld, the Dwat, as a cycle, as a moment of regeneration, and you start over. Cyclical. Look at there's an image on the bottom half of this page I gave you where it's a circle. It has an image of the horizons, two women who are pouring life fluid into the situation. And that notion is one of the cycle of life, the cyclical process that our tradition teaches. That this idea of self-creation, if you don't remember anything else from this class, the idea that you extract yourself from yourself, that makes you like God, not God. Don't get me wrong. Don't leave here saying, well, Brother Ray said, I'm God. Didn't say that. Which one do you need? It's still extras there. So this is what he said, going back to the text. He says, you will stand up on the other side engaging the miracle of the Creator. In other words, you're going to now engage this miracle of self-creation, of extracting yourself from yourself. Because that's essentially what this Baka idea is about. Another way of considering this is to think of the egg. This symbol gets used a lot. What are the components in a fertilized egg?
You have the central cell, and then you have the fluid that it feeds off that nourishes the central cell, and then the shell of protection.
Okay, shell.
Yeah.
And then you have like a little thin membrane
Yeah.
also inside that shell, right? But what happens inside, let's talk about a chicken egg. Let's keep it simple that way. Because human eggs are a little bit different. Same idea fundamentally, but different kind of metaphor. But in a bird egg, in a falcon egg, what happens inside that egg? What's the process? Biology students?
It divides and divides.
Okay, so the cell continues to divide, differentiates itself into body parts.
Right.
If it's fertilized.
That's what I
If
said.
it's not
Yeah, that's what I said. Fertilize.
Yeah.
I did say fertilize. Because fertilize, if you're going to eat it,
Yeah.
you don't want to see all that when you break open your morning egg.
Oh, right.
That has happened to me once or twice in life, where you get an egg that's like, whoo, chicken today, not fried egg. Okay. Yeah, I know. So body parts start to differentiate, right? And then what is the nutrition that the embryo chick is living off of?
The yolk.
It's the yolk, the protein. It's the albumin. I think it's the albumin. It's the inside of that egg. Now, as an entity, that egg is destructing itself from the inside to be able to live on the outside. And let that sit for a second, because that concept, your self-destruction, your reconfiguration, eating within yourself, allows you to extract yourself from yourself. Without the yolk, the chick ain't going nowhere, right? Has to be inside that protective shell, but can't live in the protective shell. When you get to a certain point, you have to come out of the egg or die, be stillborn, right? You don't have any choice about it. Life requires it, right? So the concept was that this is a metaphor for self-creation, because everything you need is in and on you. You're eating off of that which is part of you to make yourself something new. And then you got to go through some trouble. You got to go through some trials. To break out of the egg requires energy and persistence. Little chicks, if you've ever been around, like when you were in high school, maybe you had an incubator and they did an experiment where they had the eggs and you got to see a chick come out. Chicks do not break out of the egg like boom all of a sudden. You have to peck, hours, sometimes days, to get out. The chicken probably thinking, why is the chicken guy make me?
Suppose that egg is put in an ice box. And suppose it's put in a thing of coal. You know, just like a mother may be on drugs, even though the baby's inside, the baby's not really being nourished or being recreated in a way that. So there are other forces other than the internal force
Absolutely.
that affect.
Higher level of self.
Absolutely. And that's just the way it is.
A higher level of self.
Higher level.
Of self.
Yeah. Because then you wonder, because then you have to go, okay, so even if you came for a brief moment,
Yeah.
why did you come?
Or if you couldn't come.
Or if you couldn't come, if you were stillborn, what did that do for your parents? Because it had an effect on them.
Yeah.
Your mother in particular. A child who miscarries, that mother has got to go through it, right? The father got to go through it. If you were really wanting to be a parent, and that child, and I have friends that they tried to get pregnant, and it took them years. When they got pregnant, the baby, you know, it didn't all come together. Baby died, and they tried again. Doctor told sister, when I'm thinking about it, if you keep trying to have a baby, you're gonna die in childbirth. Her last opportunity to have a kid, she got pregnant. She was 4 months pregnant, and they said, if you don't lay flat for the next 5 months, you're not gonna have this baby, and you might die. And for the sacrifice to have a child, she did that. My friend Patricia Moorhead. She said, okay, and now she got a beautiful daughter who's like 9 years old, doing great, but that was a sacrifice for her to go through that. She had to be on her back, couldn't turn over to the side, had to be on her back the whole time, right? So there's something about that moment, like why, it's that whatever that septepi was, that moment of creation, whatever it was, why did you come? What are the forces around you that you're contending with? Right? And everybody has it. This is the thing about this text. This text comes from thousands of years ago, but they're going through the same human process, trying to figure it out. So he says, and this is the punchline, he says, such is his nature. He comes forth by extracting himself from himself. He says, you endure the pain of life, denying me death until death has come. To enjoy, and here's another argument, he says, to enjoy through me the beyond or eternity, would that be worse? And then he says, see, life is but a movement of eternal return. It's the image you have at the bottom of this page. Life is a movement of eternal return. It's another version of that same idea. And I'll pass the book around, folks want to see it. And then he says, even trees fall. So he's trying to make all the arguments he can based on nature. He's trying to say all of these things happen, judgment happens, and then he says, trample upon evil, appease my pain. This is still the man talking. Ba ain't said much anything yet, right? He says, Jehudi, judge me, who holds the balance of natural law. He's inviting judgment. I'm doing the right thing. Let him judge me. Let Kansu judge me. Let Ra judge me. I'm doing the right thing. And then he says, unhappy me. He's got another little personal lamentation. You know how it is. Sometimes you feel bad for society and you feel bad for yourself too. Like you just got a long tooth, or however they say that. Your lip is poked out. Unhappy me, crushed beneath the weight of my heart, which he will raise up in the mystical encounter with the Lord of transformations hidden in my body. So he's saying the Lord of transformations is in his body. Then it's almost like his body has had enough, right? He says, what kind of man are you? You know, you got to throw the gauntlet down. What kind of person are you, right? Have you lived out your life to its conclusion? You fret over life like the Lord of heaps. The Lord of heaps is a derogatory title to the person who only cares about money, like stacking paper. It's interesting, it's the same language, right? Heaps. You got all kinds of stuff, right? You fret over life like the Lord of heaps, because that person usually is greedy and is worried about keeping their stuff. They ain't worried about sharing their stuff, right? Because they don't say it's bad to have material wealth. It's bad to hoard it. It's bad to hold on to it. You're supposed to get wealth to serve people, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, etc. It says, and then his boss says, I have spoken. I take no part in it. And he says, Nepha is already 1 foot off the ground. And Nepha is a concept that says it's bad, chaos. It could take, if you don't take care, any evil could possess you. You will be brought to a stop. And then he says, your name will die. This is the whole thing about taking your own life. It says your name will die. All right. And then we'll go on. Another aspect of this, and take a look, this is on the back, the image on the very back. He goes on, and then one of the things he continues to say, but in this body, this is the boss still talking. I am the progeny, I'm the child, the successor of the great ass, E-I-E. So there was this notion that the symbolism was a donkey. And we know the characteristics of a mule or donkey is stubbornness. Like, part of the reason you use them in backpacking and rough terrain is that they're stubborn enough to keep trying. So the stubbornness actually has a good quality to it. But in Kemet, they use the ears of an ass associated with the image of a sar. And so on that image you see a sar with the ears of an ass. And the whole notion is that the ass has this donkey, this stubborn being has two functions. One is a rebellious function. It's inside you, there's this like, I don't agree with this guy, why would you do this to me? Why would you do this to other people? Why? And then the ass also is seen as the vehicle for your liberation. It's seen as the transporter to get you across to your transformation. In Christianity, they used it, the image of Jesus Christ coming into the week of his crucifixion on the back of a donkey. On Palm Sunday. So he comes in. So they're using that same metaphor, right? But this notion of an ass, he says, I'm the progeny of EIE, a fire which can never cool. I cause the other to burst forth, O soul, in flame, and he goes, I consume the true source. And there's a relatively esoteric conversation that goes back and forth. And he said, and he's going back and forth still. Endure my soul, assist in the creation of my divine heir. This is the man talking now. He'll present the offering rising from the tomb on the day of burial. So he's still going back and forth. His soul responds. Remember, such a burial is a sorry matter. Tears flow. And he's talking about if you take your life, your people around you are going to be mourning for you in a way that's different than if you had lived out to the natural conclusion of your life. It says, tears flow. You shall never reach that summit to gaze upon the rising and setting sun. The flood will take you. The sun will take you. He basically goes all through this and says that this is not the way to end your life. And then he says, and we're almost to the part in Husia. He says this. He says, I spoke to my soul in reply to what it had said. Oh, loathsome is my name, worse than the stench of carrion under the burning skies of a summer's day. So it's like roadkill on a hot day, right? Loathsome is my name, worse than fish rejected from the catch, rotting under the burning sky. Loathsome is my name, worse than the stink of brooding ducks nesting among the reeds. Loathsome is my name, more than the smell of fishermen, more than the creeks of the marshes where they have fished. There's all this fishy smell going on. Loathsome is my name, worse than the smell of crocodile. Loathsome is my name, worse than, and this is a little bit like chauvinistic in my opinion, worse than a woman who tells lies to her man. You could probably just say worse than a person telling lies to their partner, whoever.
It said it right.
You said it right. See, I'm gonna let you sit in that, and I'm gonna step back so when you start, I don't get hit. All right. Loathsome is my name. Worse than a strong youth showing weakness before his rival. Loathsome is my name. It is a closed circle around a captured renegade, aware of his own end. And then, let's see. So somebody read, this is the first part in the Husia, page 80, passage number 1.
I spoke to my soul that I might answer what it said. To whom shall I speak today? Brothers and sisters are evil, and friends today are not worth loving. Hearts are great with greed, and everyone seizes his or her neighbor's goods. Kindness has passed away, and violence is imposed on everyone. To whom shall I speak today? People willingly accept evil, and goodness is cast to the ground everywhere. Those who should enrage people by their wrongdoing make them laugh at their evil deeds. People plunder.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
People plunder, and everyone seizes his or her neighbor's goods.
Okay. So it kind of goes on in that way. Like, who could I speak to? The society has broken down. Very similar to Kepler, Rasaneb, that passage. Somebody pick up, and we'll read a little bit of this and then get to our conclusion on it. Page 81, passage number 3, where it says, thus.
Death to me today is like health to the ill, like going outdoors after confinement. Death to me today is like the smell of myrrh, like sitting under the sail on a windy day. Death to me today is like the fragrance of lotus, like sitting on the shore of feasting. Death to me today is like a well-trodden way, like returning home from war. Death to me today is like the clearing up of clouds from the sky, like a person discovering that which was unknown. Death to me today is like longing to see home after spending many years in captivity.
Okay. All right. So, and then there's a more around that, poetic notion of what death is like. And again, this man is using every argument he possibly can to get his vibe. He's saying, 1, it would be good for you if you came, with me, because then you wouldn't feel. 2, the society is crazy and messed up and trial and tribulation everywhere. Why would you or me or anybody else want to be here? And he keeps going. And then he finally says how great death is, right? And I can understand, having gone through the experience with my mother, that at a certain point people are ready to go. But that's different than this. Because when your body has put on you and you've been in a place and you can feel that energy of I'm ready, right? And you've done your work. Unlike this man who is trying to get out of work. He's trying to avoid what he came to do. And then finally, his Ba has a closing word on it. And if somebody could read this next 2 paragraphs, passage number 4.
Surely, one who reaches the beyond will be a living God, punishing the offenses of the wrongdoer. Surely, one who reaches the beyond will be one who stands in the sun border of Ra, causing abundant gifts to be given to the temples. Surely, one who reaches the beyond will be considered wise and will not be prevented from appealing to Ra when he or she speaks. And my soul said to me, cast your complaints aside, my comrade and brother. Make offerings on the sacrificial fire and cling to life as I have said. Love me, your soul, here. Set aside thoughts of death and desire death only when your body joins the earth. Then I will alight on you after you have become truly weary, and we shall dwell together forever.
So the soul essentially gives him all these opportunities to go back and forth and say, but ultimately says, stop complaining. That's part of what's got to happen. You can have the lamentation, right? You can tell why you can have that, sigh of relief, right? But the message here is cast your complaint to the side. And then it says, make offerings on the sacrificial fire and cling to life, as I have said. What does it mean by offerings on the sacrificial fire in this context? Not so much.
It's a sacrificial fire.
Yeah. Well, it's
Enduring the hardship of doing the work.
Yeah.
enduring life.
Yeah.
You know, make a sacrifice of your life into whatever you find hard about this situation. See this trial and tribulation period as a fire. How will you make a sacrifice? How will you put yourself in a position of being useful? How will you put yourself in a position of having eternal life? In other words, it's saying you need to get in. You can't step on the outside and complain all the time. It's okay to say, and this is the thing, is this passage, this text, the story acknowledges and affirms the need sometimes to say this is bad. It's probably like the beginning of black psychology. I probably don't know about it, other people, but they probably would say this is the beginning of self-reflection. Of like when things aren't going the way you want them to go, you talk to people outside you. Now talk to yourself, talk to your spirit, talk to your soul, right? Have a conversation with God. My grandmother and them would say, grandma and them would say, have a little talk with Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, that's all of it's the same stuff, y'all. It is not like it's that different, right? It's the African sensibility is stop complaining, get on with it. Yes.
I just want to read a quote from that I read to the class a couple of weeks ago from Maladoma Some in his book on Ritual. I'll read it again. He said, every person is sent to this outpost called Earth to work on a project that is intended to keep the cosmic order healthy.
So you're part of this whole.
Yes.
Like you can't, it's almost like if the earth were an egg, you've got to participate inside of it, right? Yeah, trying to
You know, as I'm listening to this story and then how the bar is saying this, in essence, hold on, and how, and to me, to a certain extent, how bad this act would be if you committed it. I thought back to my Catholicism training, where if you committed suicide as a Catholic, you could not be buried in the church. They would not bury you in a Catholic cemetery, and your soul is going right to hell. Bang.
Same idea. That this and I don't, who knows where that the Catholics got it from? Probably from us.
Right.
But that whole notion of life is hard at every time period. Thurman says it. To live is a very serious thing. Almost every teacher teaches in Hinduism. They say life is suffering. Life is suffering, right? But the tradition there teaches about what is the cause of the cessation of suffering, not to be attached to the outcome of things. Yes.
I got a Facebook post, and it's, to paraphrase it, it said, you don't receive hard things in your life because you've done something bad, but because you've done something right. So